To Gazali. Today we have a very interesting guest. Not many Indians are directly connected with Denmark. It's a Scandinavian country. These days with the charter flights coming to Goa, we get a lot of Scandinavians coming to Goa. But Denmark has had connection with India. Very few people are aware that we had a place called Frederick Nagar. Frederick Nagar is in the present day Bengal, and this is Sirampur. It was called Frederick Nagar, and Frederick was the king of Denmark, joint king of Denmark and Norway. And they had also a place called Trankobar, which is Taranga Badi in Chennai, near Chennai in Tamil Nadu. And somehow in the race of colonialism between Portuguese, English, French and the Dutch, the Danish did not survive. And so they just sold these places to the British somewhere in 1845-48. And the rent they were paying for the whole of this Tarangabadi was 3,000 rupees annually. And then they sold it to the British. I don't know for how much, but the contract I think is still there existing. So we have had connections, and personally I have been very lucky that I was invited recently for showing my sculpture in Aarhus in Denmark, and I loved the people. Denmark is a very small country of just 5.5 million people, just about 3.5 times bigger than Goa, compared to our population of India of 1.3 billion. And we have with us today a very interesting gentleman, Thomas Sistel. He is the director of Danish Cultural Institute. And this institute is an independent body, not directly connected with the embassy. And they have some wonderful plans. I was having conversation with him. Welcome to this program. And I would like to know more of the agenda of Danish Cultural Institute.
Thank you for having me. What we are working on, we have kind of an overarching theme of everything that we want to do, which is where we call it new encounters. So that's basically what we want. We want to create new encounters between our countries, between scientists and artists and audiences. And underneath that, new encounters, because in a new encounters also means that we work by reciprocity. That we're not here to sort of merely sell or display Danish artists. We want to create partnerships and collaborations with Indians. So if that's the overarching theme, new encounter.
Instead of monologues, you want to have dialogues with India. Yeah? And you have very beautifully sort of given different heads to it. Can you tell us about it?
So underneath this new encounters, we've defined 5 themes that we want to work with. And those themes are chosen because we believe that they have resonance in India and resonance in Denmark. Those 5 themes are democracy, resources, education, livable cities, and all of a sudden I forgot the last one. So education, resources, democracy.
Identity.
Identity was the 5th and not least. So around those themes, we will do our work because we need to focus and we need to ensure that we are not just here to sort of on some random public diplomacy agenda.
Let us start with identity.
Sure.
Because you rightly pointed out that there is a completely different identity of India and of Denmark, and especially in the present day India, which is going through a kind of identity rethink, because everything here, patriotism and identities are being redefined. In this context, can you tell us about your project on identity?
Sure. I think identity is sort of one of the topics that I'm most happy about, because I think it has, when we work with artists, I think identity is something that artists are all very often sort of considering, discussing, portraying one way or another. Who am I and who are you? Basically that kind of question. And as Dane, we're an old nation. India is a new nation. I know
But India is an old civilization and a new nation, and you are a new nation and a young civilization.
Yes, but in terms of nation, I think India is still discussing and debating what does Indianness mean. What is it that constitutes you as an Indian and not something else? And it's not a closed, to me, it's not a closed discussion. It's not, it hasn't got a, it's not mathematics, because it's constantly evolving, because identity is formed in collaboration and discussions with your counterparts. See, if you did not have a counterpart, you wouldn't really know your identity, because you have to sort of reflect upon, it's a mirror.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that is something that is, for us as Danes, and for you as Indians, we need to have that constant dialogue about who am I and who are you, and because by that we learn about each other and we learn about ourselves as well.
You pointed out that a major difference between India and Denmark is a monoculture and India is a polyculture. And in India, sort of the whole backbone of Indian culture is basically the plurality. And these are the issues definitely need to be discussed.
But can I just a note on that? I think for many Indians, you would, so when I say that Denmark is a monoculture, it's one language, it's one religion, it's one ethnicity. But actually, it wasn't like that always. As Danes, we tend to forget that we used to be an empire. We had we had Norway, we had Sweden.
You were also influencing England.
Yes, also. And we used to be a multicultural society. In 1864, we lost wars with Prussia, and Denmark got diminished to more or less the size it has today. So we went from multiculturalism to monoculturalism within the split second. And to be honest, Denmark has struggled with that ever since, and now with the influx of immigrants, we are in a way coming back to where we were, and we are actually, to be honest, struggling a little with it. I'm not saying, it's not about good guys or bad guys, but so our identity is changing towards something more multicultural, and I think India has we have a lot to learn from India on that perspective.
Yeah, I think Indians also need to learn from our past, because many a times there are trends of creating one culture, monoculture here. And for me, I basically believe that cultures are always mixed. There is no static culture. Having static culture is like having a non-peeing area in a swimming pool. Well, let's talk about I think resources. Denmark is one country which is giving lots of importance to conservation of environment resources. In that context, what kind of collaborations with India are possible?
So we have a long tradition of resource management. I'm sorry, it's a little businessy language, but basically taking care of the resources that we have. We used to be a poor country. 150 years ago, we were a very poor country. So there was scarcity. And we had harsh winters and short summers. So I think we learned to make the most out of what we had. And that now we're a rich country, and we see that India is struggling with or the pitfalls of consumerism, of plastic waste, of using our resources in a wrongful way. I think we have some ideas that we might be able to inspire you with, so that so basically that's the thinking on resources, and I think we share, as Indians and Danes, we share a belief in taking care of the planet. We're not always doing it in the right way, and we are definitely not either. We have a lot to do, but I think having resources is not a Danish problem. It's not an Indian problem, it's a global problem. So if we join forces and get creative, I think we have a lot to share and learn from each other.
Can you elaborate this with context to water?
Yes. So we are also affected by the climate change. We have the problem of getting too much water in a very short time. So the municipality of Copenhagen has taken some drastic steps in basically sort of addressing all that, how to deal with too much water in too short time, so that every part of the city is actually being built to cater to that. And India has many problems in terms of water. Sharing water between states. One state you have a dam and the farmers need the water, and the next state and you have with neighboring countries sharing waterways. And I think we want to sort of be able to help out where we can in terms of managing water, so that it doesn't become a next big crisis.
See, one of the things which you mentioned was basically that's where you could help us, because you have better, efficient ways of managing.
Yes, and there's some solutions that are at hand that that we could utilize. And now you might ask, what on earth am I talking about water out of sort of a businessy perspective? So my the reason is that we see sort of culture in a broader context. So we're working on, for instance, creating a water conference in India, where we join forces with scientists who can tell us what are the problems and what's the big scenario, and we have businesses that have solutions, but that will be a sort of standard conference. What we want to do is we want to bring artists in as well, to work on water as a concept, as a theme, so that it's kind of a 360 approach on water. So looking forward to doing that. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think that will be very interesting, because one of my favorite projects is also water and also Indian Ocean. But Indian Ocean is very, very important from that point of view. And just taking a little offshoot and coming to the next agenda is livable cities. And you have very, very strong opinions about how cities should be planned and what's happening in India. So can you elaborate on that, the Indian cities vis-a-vis Danish cities?
So India, the urbanization in India is on a fast track, and it will be so for many, many years. And I think what sometimes the city planning in India is done pretty short-sightedly. And I think if you talk to city planners around the world, they will say that when you plan a city, you need to think at least 2 generations ahead, because it's you are really touching upon some superstructures that you need to get in place. So it's not just about a new highway. It's not about a metro. That's what will be the next metro or the next metro again. So I think where we as Danes have been good, not always, but we have some good examples of making sure that we create cities that are good to live in, that are what architects has framed cities for people, and not for cars, not for business, not for anything else, but good for people. And I think that we've had some foresighted politicians, and they've been able to see that many years ahead. And now we have Copenhagen, which is voted as the world's most livable city.
And you also have smaller cities.
Yes.
Most of your cities are sort of average, medium size.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And like here, where of course you are popular. And here, I must make an observation that many a times city planning here is done not with 2 generations ahead, but just with the next election. And that's what spoils the whole thing. I mean, I would like to talk about city planning and architecture. So one of the best cities I have seen in the world with sort of a variety of wonderful architecture is Copenhagen, and a few other places in Denmark, even Aarhus. And Danes have been great architects and great designers. What do you think has made that? Because it is not just about good buildings, but look at products. Some of the most important products in product design come from Denmark.
It's a very good question and not easy to answer, but if now you're asking it, I think it's because we are great believers in doing processes proper. And I know it's a little complex, but let me try and explain that Bang & Olufsen, it's an audio company. They make expensive stuff, but also very, very beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
So basically what they do is they follow a process where they make sure that the end product has just about what is needed, nothing more, just about what's needed. And that kind of design-driven way of approaching design and architecture helps. Because if you set an engineer, and sorry, I like engineers, but they're bad designers. Because if you gave an engineer a task of designing a piece of furniture, he would or she would probably put all the different stuff that you could do with it, bells and whistles. But does that make a better chair? No. It makes a chair that can do a lot. So there's a difference between an engineer-driven process of designing and a design-driven process. And I think we're good at the
thinking design.
And thinking design, taking actually design serious. That it's not about the beauty of the designed object. It's about the beauty of its function. So that function or form must follow function. Otherwise it's waste of design.
So there are many architectural firms and design firms are well known. I have had an opportunity. Well, Sydney Opera is done by a Danish designer, and then we had recently in Serpentine Gallery they do every year a new kind of a shamiana, and very, very lovely. And hope that we have more collaborations between Danish designers and architects. I think that would be a very interesting thing to do. You talked about education is one of your agendas. And in that area, what are the plans which you have?
We want to engage kids in arts and in creativity. Too often we see education being almost done as if it was a factory. And we know that our kids, they will not work in factories because robots will take over. Artificial intelligence will take over. So we need kids that are creative and are able to think for themselves, not necessarily say what the teacher wants them to say, but be reflective, to be observant, and to be critical. And I think utilizing art in education is a tool of enhancing the free thought, the creativity, and all the benefits that comes with that. So we are just asking why, if our kids are not to be factory workers, why does a classroom look like a factory? So that's the kind of, so we want to engage with all, we have a starting engagement with a school in Bangalore that will work on these lines. They've hired ex-principal from a Danish school, so he's living in Bangalore now and is a good friend of ours, and we're looking forward to collaborate on what art can do in the field of education.
This is a project which is supported by Lego.
Yes, we are discussing or in contact with Lego, and they are setting up the school as a kind of educational showcase on what creativity and education, all the benefits that can do. And Lego, as you might know, is a Danish company that has sort of very value-based approach. So we're very happy to continue.
I think we will be in Goa very much welcome this kind of a thing, because Goa has educational institutions, but it's still young, because we were liberated from the Portuguese only in '61. So Goa is, perhaps Goa University is the youngest university in a way. And so we should have a lot of scope in creating this kind of programs in Goa. One of the things which you talked about is democracy. And Denmark perhaps is the rich country, and social security wise, its rates perhaps one of the highest in the world. And yet sometimes I see there are protests by people even against the Danish government, and you supporting democracy. So what will be your kind of, can you elaborate on this and then basically talk about what kind of a projects you would like to do in India?
I think we as Danes and you as Indians, we share a lot of values. And one of the values that we share is on democracy and the belief in equal rights. And yes, we're a rich country. That doesn't mean that people necessarily are happy.
Satisfied.
Or that's more rightly put, satisfied, because there's always something to struggle for. There's always something that is not right, and that is how it should be.
Yeah,
and I think to be taking on that value, those shared values on democracy, I see a great potential. One of the ideas that we have is we, by accident or coincidence, we have elections at the same time as you have, parliamentary elections. So one of our ideas is to send a photographer, an Indian photographer, to Denmark, send a Danish photographer to India, and not because they should do a reportage, sort of newspaper style, from the elections as such. It's not about the politicians, it's not about the electoral vote. It's about what are we talking about before we vote? What are people, when they're having dinner and discussing whom should I, politics or whatever, what forms that discussion? What is it that we are, because politicians put out agendas that they think we will be interested in. But are we? So what are we talking about? So and so that's one of the ideas. And then they should take photos, perhaps stay with families, and the photos from the Danish scene and Indian scene should be displayed in both
together.
places.
I think it's a wonderful project.
Yes, it is, and I think it could be, because we need input. And to be honest, what I think, I'm not sure, is that I think we're talking about the same. It's the same issues in India are the same issues in Denmark. We are sort of angry at our politicians. We are angry at the financial sector. We're angry at, and we want security, and you want security.
I think in general, an artist always takes an anti-establishment stand. That's normal. Yeah, that's normal. Artist, there's a very nice thing I read about, which says an artist is a kind of a transmitter and receptor of ideas of a society. Yes. The artist receives the ideas and transmits the ideas. That's one of the functions.
Yes.
And
I think sort of commenting on that, that's why it's so interesting to work with art, because being a receptor and a transmitter, artists are at the forefront. Yes. They are showing us problems, sometimes ways, and at least addressing discussions, issues and topics that are of societal importance.
The last topic we will talk about is food. In Denmark, they started a revolution in food, which is the neo-Nordic cuisine. And they started a new kind of food, experimentation with food. Please tell us more about it, and tell us in what way Goa could become a kind of that laboratory of creating a new revolution in food.
So if you look at the 70s in Denmark, it was a food disaster. Horribly processed foods, microwaved stuff, frozen foods all over. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So a set of entrepreneurs, chefs and business people, they set about to create the Nordic food Manifesto. Yes. It was basically just, I think, 10 principles on that food should be locally produced, it should be organic, and all kinds of stuff that we now take more or less for granted. And by that, they reinvented, they jump-started the Nordic food scene, and which has been especially sort of a Danish privilege, but also Swedish and Norwegian. So what they then did was to, because if you need good bread, we eat a lot of bread, then you need good wheat. But the wheats that were produced up until the 70s were kind of just produced to be sort of pest resistant, sort of technical, very efficient. But during that evolution, it lost its taste. So they dug back into, you could say, the archives and found grain sorts that were sort of out of use, out of date, because they were cumbersome to harvest. But now we are sort of have reintroduced old foodstuffs, which the farmers get higher prices for, and we pay more for it because we'd like to eat better and less. So that really changed stuff. And in Goa, I think what I have experienced is that you import a lot of your foodstuff from Karnataka.
Yes.
Farmers sort of don't want to work because there's easier money in the
That's
tourism
the right
industry.
observation.
And there's easier money in the tourism industry.
Yeah.
Some of the original Goan products from the agriculture is being left out, forgotten, because nobody's using it, nobody's cares for it. But what if Goa reinvented itself with it? You have a strong heritage also on the culinary sector. But what if we revitalized that, found the old rice varieties or whatever vegetables that you have, got some chefs on board and recreated sort of a new Goan cuisine,
Yes.
which would attract at the end wealthy, high-paying tourists that are here not to stay in the five-star hotels, but who wants to experience the real Goa.
I think we will finish on that note. Neo-Goan cuisine, inspired by the Danish experiment of neo-Nordic cuisine, spearheaded by this great chef René. And René started this restaurant called Noma. And I'm told that it takes almost more than a year to have book a table in that restaurant. And if you want to eat for 2 people, it's, I think, 25,000 rupees and wine separate. So hopefully we will have this kind of an experiment inspired by you guys, and we will be very, very happy if we could collaborate on such a project. I think we in Goa, I mean, our foodies, we love our food, especially the fish dishes, and I think we are looking forward to that kind of a Danish connection.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah.